No one could have anticipated this. Just days after the entire world came together to grieve the passing of Pope Francis, his sister unexpectedly broke her silence, and what she revealed has left even the most loyal followers of the Catholic Church in utter disbelief. Hidden truths, deeply emotional memories, and a side of Pope Francis the world had never witnessed, until now, have come to light. As heartfelt tributes poured in from all parts of the globe in the wake of Pope Francis's death, many assumed they had heard every story worth telling about the cherished spiritual leader of the Catholic faith. But then, without warning, his sister Maria Elena Bergoglio emerged from her long-held silence. For many years, she remained out of the spotlight, rarely engaging with the press, choosing instead to guard her reflections and personal experiences. Yet something about her brother's passing stirred a change in her, compelling her to open up. What she shared was not just moving, it was raw, profound, and in some ways, controversial. In this story, we will uncover the full extent of what Maria Elena revealed. She opened up about her brother's final moments, the regrets that lingered in their family, untold stories from their shared childhood in Argentina, and the immense pressure he endured behind the closed doors of the Vatican. We'll also delve into how the Church reacted to her heartfelt tribute, how the public processed it, and why her words have sparked intense global discussions. Stay with us, because as we peel back the layers, you'll hear revelations about Pope Francis that few ever imagined, truths that challenge the polished narrative the world has embraced for years. And when you hear what Maria Elena said toward the end of her statement, you'll understand why the room was left in absolute silence. For more than 10 years, Maria Elena Bergoglio, the only remaining sibling of Pope Francis, chose a life removed from fame or attention. While her brother, born Jorge Mario Bergoglio, ascended to become one of the most influential religious figures on the planet, Maria Elena remained in Argentina, living a quiet life. She seldom spoke to the press, never sought to capitalize on her brother's global recognition, and kept her distance from the Vatican's spotlight. But after the Pope's passing at the age of 88, something shifted deep within her. She delivered a statement that was not orchestrated by church officials. It was not filtered through any official Vatican communication. It was real, it was unfiltered, and it was heartbreakingly personal. In her first public remarks since his death, Maria Elena said, "He wasn't just the Pope to me. He was Jorge, my brother, the boy who ran after dogs in our backyard, who made me giggle when I was ill, and who cried quietly the night our father passed away." She paused and followed up with a statement that left journalists and listeners stunned. "I never wanted him to become Pope. It cost us more than anyone will ever understand." That single line raised countless questions. What had becoming Pope cost them? Why had she never expressed this before? What exactly did she mean? In the days that followed, both journalists and devoted Catholics alike began searching for answers. What other secrets had Maria Elena carried in silence for so many years? And why had she chosen this particular moment to speak? But that was merely the beginning. What she went on to share would send shockwaves across the globe. It wasn't about church doctrine or papal politics. It was about family, about sacrifice, and about a truth that could reshape the very legacy of the man millions revered. Stay with us, because the revelations that follow may shift everything you thought you understood about Pope Francis. Maria Elena didn't speak out of grief alone. She spoke from memory. As her story unfolded, the world was granted an intimate glimpse behind the ornate Vatican curtains and into the childhood of the man who would become Pope Francis. Long before he donned the white cassock and addressed millions from the balcony of St. Peter's, Jorge Mario Bergoglio was simply a curious, thoughtful boy in Buenos Aires. She described her brother as quiet, yet fiercely protective. Even as a young child, she said, he carried this heaviness, like he knew he had a responsibility bigger than himself. But, according to Maria, there was someone who shaped his soul long before the church ever did. Their grandmother, Rosa. A woman of unwavering faith and formidable will, Rosa instilled in Jorge a fire for justice, mercy, and repentance. However, this is where the narrative took an unexpected and heartbreaking turn. Maria Elena revealed that they both experienced a deep and lasting trauma during their youth, an event that Jorge carried with him even as he walked the marble halls of the Vatican. "There was a fracture in our family," she said. Not a crisis of faith, but of blood, and Jorge bore the weight of it more than anyone. According to Maria, the trauma stemmed from a long-concealed truth involving their father, a secret second family. She didn't name names, but claimed that Jorge discovered the truth when he was about 12 years old. From that moment, his innocence was shattered. He became consumed with righteousness, she explained. It was like he needed to make up for the sins of the people he loved. She believes this revelation may have played a major role in his decision to pursue the priesthood. He didn't run to God because of a calling, she said, her voice trembling. He ran because he needed to escape the shame. That confession rocked not only the Catholic community, but also many who had followed Pope Francis throughout his papacy. Suddenly, his humility and self-denial were seen not just as virtuous, but as forms of personal penance. Maria Elena's words struck a deep chord, not only because they painted a more complex image of her brother, but because they hinted at the invisible burdens he carried. Burdens that may have influenced every decision he made during his tenure as the head of the Catholic Church. And just when it seemed like the most shocking part had been said, Maria implied there was more, much more. Something she said, "The Church would rather I never speak about." What could be so sensitive, so potentially explosive that even the Vatican preferred silence? Keep watching, because what we're about to uncover involves a secret Vatican archive, a hidden file that Maria Elena claims her brother kept under lock and key until his dying day. And the contents of that file might alter the course of church history forever. After the initial waves of her revelations sent ripples through both religious and secular circles, Maria Elena sat down for one final, intimate interview, one she almost declined. Her voice quivered, not from emotion, but from the immense weight of what she was about to disclose. "I struggled for years," she admitted. "This wasn't just about my brother. It was about secrets buried deep in the highest chambers of the Vatican. Secrets that Pope Francis took with him to the grave. You must understand," she began carefully. Jorge believed the world wasn't ready for certain truths, not because they were sinister, but because they had the potential to shatter the foundation of what people believed in. According to Maria, during his years as Archbishop of Buenos Aires and later as Pope, Jorge assembled a private archive of letters, documents, and recordings. Within the Vatican, it was quietly referred to as Il Dossier Nascosto, the hidden file. Its contents were never made public. In fact, even his closest confidants were allegedly unaware of the full scope of what was inside. So how did Maria Elena know about it? She revealed that during her brother's last trip to Argentina, just before he was elected Pope, he gave her a letter and a physical key. A real key, she clarified. It unlocked a private safe located in a hidden archive beneath Vatican City. In the letter, he wrote cryptically, "If anything ever happens to me, and people begin to wonder why I remain silent on certain matters, tell them to look beyond the gold and marble. Tell them to search where even light refuses to shine." And that's where the story begins to twist. The atmosphere was chilling. Maria Elena Bergoglio had never once used the key entrusted to her. Out of reverence for her brother's final wishes, she left the letter unopened until the day he passed. That morning, driven by a profound sense of duty, she finally broke the seal. Inside, she uncovered something astonishing, a written confession of sorts. In Jorge Mario Bergoglio's own handwriting, he detailed the moment his faith was shaken to its core. The letter alluded to a tangled web of financial misconduct, concealment of high-level abuse, and covert alliances between the Vatican and oppressive regimes. Though Pope Francis refrained from naming names, Maria explained that the clues he left behind painted a clear enough picture. He had found himself at the intersection of two immense forces, his role as a spiritual leader, and his fear of tearing the church apart from within. What made this revelation even more disturbing was his decision to remain silent, not out of guilt, but because he feared the church would crumble under the weight of another global scandal. He opted for a slow internal transformation over public exposure. Yet, as Maria revealed, in his final years, he began to question that choice deeply. He confessed to her, "Maybe I was too soft. Maybe I should have been the Pope who told the truth, not the one who protected it." Those words echoed with haunting vulnerability. According to Maria, in the weeks leading up to his death, Jorge had made moves to ensure that his hidden documents, his so-called dossier, would be released after his passing. But something, or someone, prevented that from happening. The file, she claimed, mysteriously disappeared from its secure location. Vatican authorities have outright denied its existence. They offer no confirmation, no statement. But Maria is unwavering in her conviction. The file was real, and they are terrified of its contents. Which raises the most troubling question. What could be so dangerous that even a pope feared its revelation? Maria believes the answer lies in what Jorge asked her to reveal in his final moments. This wasn't merely about church politics. It was about a profound moral reckoning. A failure that Pope Francis believed would be his greatest regret. Stay with us, because what comes next is the story of a final promise made on his deathbed, one that the church may be trying desperately to bury. As the world solemnly observed the funeral rites of Pope Francis, very few were aware of what transpired in his final hours. In the dim serenity of his private chambers, Jorge whispered something to Maria Elena that would haunt her forever. His last moments were not filled with peace or quiet reflection. They were marked by an intense urgency. There was one final mission he could not let die with him, one truth he begged his sister to carry forward. "You've done all you could," she told him gently, clutching his frail hand. "You've carried more than anyone should ever bear. Let it go now." But Jorge, weakened and pale, looked at her with the intensity of a man still bearing the weight of the world. He whispered, "Promise me you'll tell them. Not just about the dossier. Tell them about the children." Maria was confused. "What children?" she asked. With his final reserves of strength, Jorge murmured, "The ones who were never counted. The ones the church failed. The ones I couldn't save." In that moment, Maria no longer saw the Pope. She saw a shattered priest, burdened by a lifetime of unspoken sorrow. According to Maria, her brother had spent years trying to shed light on what he called the quiet tragedies. These were cases of abuse and neglect that had never been formally documented. They occurred in remote missions, impoverished regions, and volatile territories, places where the church chose silence over intervention. Many of the victims were children from developing nations, their pain forgotten not just by the world, but by the very institutions sworn to protect them. "He told me there were entire cases that were never logged," Maria revealed. "Bishops had been instructed to suppress them. Bribes were paid. Witnesses silenced. And offending clergy members were relocated rather than held accountable." Jorge had attempted to reopen these cases multiple times, but met stiff resistance. Not just within the Vatican, but from local dioceses gripped by fear of scandal. The most devastating part? He blamed himself. "I wanted to protect the faith," he told Maria, "but I ended up protecting the system." In his eyes, the church's obsession with preserving its image had become a sin in itself, an institution more focused on survival than on compassion, truth, or justice. And then, with hands trembling, he gave Maria a small wooden rosary. It was unadorned, simple, and aged, not of gold, but of meaning. "This belonged to a boy in Argentina," he told her. "A boy who came to the church for help, but they turned him away. A week later, he took his own life." Jorge had carried that rosary for decades. It was his symbol of grief and silence. Today, that rosary lies in Maria's hands, a painful reminder of the truth her brother couldn't fully tell. She believes this is why the Vatican remains silent. They fear that if these untold stories and unofficial files come to light, the consequences would be catastrophic. According to Maria, church officials want the world to remember Jorge as a gentle reformer who tried his best, not as a man tormented by the sins he couldn't cleanse. Now, Maria stands at a pivotal crossroads. Should she preserve the church's image, or honor her brother's dying wish for truth? What she chooses could send ripples across the entire Catholic world. But what she hinted at next may be the most explosive revelation yet. Coming up in the next section, we dive into Maria Elena Bergoglio's claim about the man chosen to succeed Pope Francis, and the covert agreement he allegedly made well before Jorge's passing. As white smoke drifted above Vatican City once again, heralding the dawn of a new papacy, Very few outside the inner circle had any inkling of what had already been arranged behind closed doors. According to Maria Elena Bergoglio, the only surviving sibling of Pope Francis, her brother had long harbored concerns, not because of theology, but due to a secret pact made during his lifetime. During one of their final conversations, Jorge disclosed something that shook her to her core. "They've already chosen him," he said gravely, "and he's promised them silence." Maria was stunned. Who was they? What kind of silence? That's when Jorge uttered the name. Cardinal Matteo Taresco, a rising figure in the Roman Curia, known for his charm, intellect, and political finesse. Outwardly, he appeared the perfect candidate. But Jorge had come across troubling correspondences that suggested otherwise. According to him, Taresco had made quiet assurances to some of the church's most powerful internal factions. Assurances that, should he ever ascend to the papacy, he would halt any further investigations into sensitive, unopened files, particularly those relating to abuse cases from the 1980s through the early 2000s, spanning South America, parts of Africa, and Eastern Europe. And that is where the story takes its most chilling turn. These were the very cases that Pope Francis had tirelessly attempted to bring into public focus during the later years of his papacy. The same cases that had been repeatedly obstructed by influential figures within the church's highest ranks. "They don't just want history to forget," Jorge once confided in Maria. "If Tedesco becomes pope, they won't simply let the past fade, they'll obliterate it." At first, Maria Elena Bergoglio found the idea almost inconceivable. After decades of the Catholic Church being embroiled in global scrutiny over abuse scandals, why would anyone within the Vatican hierarchy want to bury even more truths, especially at this point in time? But Jorge remained firm in his conviction. The church remained fractured. On one side were those earnestly advocating for reform. On the other, those obsessed with preserving institutional stability at any cost. And for the latter, the reopening of past atrocities posed a threat, not just to personal legacies, but to the very sanctity and structure of the church's authority. Then, something even more unsettling began to unfold. As Jorge's health visibly declined, Maria observed subtle but significant changes in his daily schedule. There were fewer public events, almost no unscripted conversations with investigative journalists, and, most notably, a sharp decrease in his vocal support for accountability. Initially, she chalked it up to exhaustion, but that changed when she noticed that many of Jorge's trusted advisors had either been reassigned or had quietly vanished from the Vatican landscape. Their replacements? Individuals known to be closely aligned with Cardinal Matteo Tedesco. One unnamed insider from within the Vatican confided that Pope Francis had been preparing an apostolic letter that would demand full transparency regarding the Church's historical abuse records. The letter, according to this source, had been finalized but was suddenly shelved, allegedly under internal pressure, just weeks before Jorge's passing. That letter, Maria insists, had the potential to reshape everything, but now it might never be revealed. What Maria has implied is a charge that few have dared to voice, that in his final days, Pope Francis was politically outmaneuvered, that the church he devoted his life to had gradually distanced itself from the very values he fought to uphold, and that his successor may not have been chosen for his spirituality, but for his willingness to continue the silence that Jorge tried so desperately to break. Then came the most chilling moment of all. Maria says she received an anonymous letter not long after her brother's death. It contained just 3 sentences. "Be cautious with your words. Your brother died with dignity. Don't make the world question that." Though brief, the message shook her deeply. Still, Maria says her conscience won't allow her to remain silent. For her, this is no longer about stirring controversy. It's about preserving her brother's legacy. Now, the burning question: will she release the letters and documents Jorge left behind? Because according to her, his trust in her went far beyond whispered conversations. He left behind proof. In a quiet neighborhood of Buenos Aires, within Maria Elena Bergoglio's humble home, rests an old wooden chest. Inside it lies what may be the most incendiary collection of handwritten notes in the modern church era, the private journals of Pope Francis. These personal writings, Maria claims, cover the final 2 years of her brother's life and are filled with unfiltered reflections, encrypted warnings, and cryptic references to events and figures never before mentioned publicly. But what truly elevates the significance of these journals is not merely their author, it's the content, penned during a time when Jorge believed his voice might soon be silenced. Maria recalls a phone call from 2023, shortly after her brother suffered a major health scare. "I don't know how much longer they'll let me speak," he said, "but my hand still works. I'll write what my voice can't say." What he recorded stunned her. One early entry opens with the line, "The wolves are closing in. My silence is no longer peace. It's fear disguised as obedience." From that point forward, the tone of the journal transforms into a solemn descent, a blend of deteriorating physical health and intensifying spiritual resistance. In its pages, Jorge describes meetings with senior cardinals who, according to his notes, pressured him to stop drawing attention to unresolved abuse cases. Some advised him to prioritize church unity over exposing painful truths. But that was never Jorge's calling. He had always stood with the marginalized. One chilling passage reads, "To protect the institution by hiding the truth is to crucify Christ anew. I've seen the victims, I've heard their cries, and yet I'm told to remain diplomatic. But I was not chosen to guard secrets, I was chosen to serve God." Maria says her brother never intended for these words to remain locked away. In one of their final conversations, he asked her to share excerpts of the journal when the time felt right. Yet since his passing, she says, a wave of resistance has emerged. She's received polite requests and veiled threats from unnamed Vatican emissaries urging her to hand over the journal or keep it hidden. "They warned me it might be misunderstood, that it could cause pain and confusion," she explains. "But Jorge trusted me, and I understand now. Truth always brings discomfort before it brings healing." Perhaps the most haunting detail lies in the journal's final entry, dated just 3 days before his death. It's short, poetic, and foreboding. It reads, "If this is my last breath, let it not be wasted. A shepherd must not fear the night, for wolves scream loudest when they sense dawn." While Maria has not made the full journal public, she has allowed a select few journalists to view fragments. One of them, Italian investigative reporter Luca Morelli, described the journal as the most damning testament to Vatican resistance I've ever encountered. He added that if fully authenticated, these writings would send shockwaves, not just through the Catholic Church, but across global religious communities. But that's not all. According to Maria, the wooden chest held one more item, a sealed envelope labeled "In case of betrayal." No one, not even she, knows what's inside. She's been warned not to open it until she's absolutely sure it won't be seized or destroyed. Speculation runs rampant. Some believe it may contain hidden recordings, witness testimonies, or even a list of names tied to the very power struggle that haunted Jorge's final months. And with Cardinal Matteo Tedesco, the man Jorge once feared would silence the truth, now rising as one of the most dominant figures in the post-Francis Church, Maria stands at a painful crossroads. Does she honor her brother's final wishes and risk everything to expose what he left behind? Or does she protect his public image as a dignified leader in death? This is where the story takes a devastating turn. Maria recently shared that she's been contacted by families of abuse survivors, pleading with her to release the journal. They believe Pope Francis may have documented truths that no one else had the courage to write down. Names, places, hidden acts that were never brought to justice. For them, this journal is not just a record of the past, it's a symbol of hope. So now the question isn't whether Pope Francis was silenced. The question is, will his voice still rise, through ink and paper, to speak louder than the silence they tried to force upon him?